All right, today we are diving into one of the most elegant and honestly, one of the most profound teachings in Buddhist thought, dependent origination. I know, it sounds super complex, but stick with me because it's basically the Buddha's answer to a question that, let's be real, we all ask ourselves.
Right? Why do we get stuck in these loops? These cycles of wanting something, then getting frustrated, then worrying about it. It just goes on and on. This isn't just some abstract philosophical puzzle, it's the central problem the Buddha was trying to solve. And the answer he came up with? Well, it's less of a mystical secret and more like he uncovered the literal source code of our own reality.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we're going to define the problem, what we're actually talking about with this word suffering. Then we'll unpack the fundamental law that makes it all tick, the code of conditionality. After that, we'll trace the step-by-step chain reaction that leads us to feel stuck. And then, the best part, we'll see exactly how to break that chain. And finally, and this is crucial, we'll tie all this theory directly into how you can actually practice this stuff. So, first things first, let's look at the problem itself. When you hear that word suffering in a Buddhist context, your mind probably jumps to big, awful tragedies. But the idea here is actually way broader and honestly a lot more subtle than that. And look, this isn't meant to be pessimistic or a downer. It's a diagnosis. It's pointing to that underlying low-grade hum of dissatisfaction that's just there in an unexamined life. It's the stress of things always changing, the low-key anxiety of wanting things we don't have, and that subtle friction that just comes from our knee-jerk automatic reactions to everything that happens to us. Okay, so if suffering is the symptom, what's the actual disease? What's the cause? Well, that brings us to the underlying law of how everything, and I mean everything, comes to be. This is the code of conditionality. This right here is the core insight. It's the whole ballgame. Nothing, not a thought, not a feeling, not the phone in your hand, just pops into existence out of nowhere. Everything arises because of specific conditions. You can think of it as the operating system of reality. It's a natural law of cause and effect, and it applies to our own minds most of. Now, here is what is so incredibly cool and so elegant about this. Notice the symmetry. This principle cuts both ways. The first part, when this exists, that arises, well, that explains how we get into a mess, how suffering gets created in a chain reaction. But that second part, when this ceases, that is the key to our freedom. It means if we can just remove one of the conditions, the whole effect stops. The problem literally contains its own solution. So let's actually trace this chain reaction. Let's see it in action. The best way to think about it is like a line of dominoes. One seemingly tiny, insignificant event happens, and it just sets off this cascade that ends in that feeling of being stuck, that suffering we were talking about. It all kicks off with something incredibly simple, contact. A sensation comes in through one of your senses. You see a cookie, you hear your phone buzz, you feel the wind on your skin. At this point, it's just raw data. Then, instantly, your mind slaps a label on it. Pleasant, painful, or neutral. That's the feeling. Now, so far, nothing has actually gone wrong. This is all just happening. And this is what's so mind-blowing about the analysis. It's not some vague, fluffy philosophy. It is a microscopic, moment-by-moment breakdown of experience. An object, your eye, and consciousness all meet. Boom, that's contact. And because of that contact, a feeling immediately arises. This happens thousands of times a day, almost entirely under our radar. Okay, here's where we get into trouble. Based on that simple little feeling, craving arises. We automatically want more of the pleasant thing, or we want to push the painful thing away. Then that initial spark of craving intensifies into grasping. This is the exact moment a simple feeling gets tangled up in the story of me and mine. It goes from that's a pleasant taste to I need that cookie to be happy, or from that's a loud noise to that sound is ruining my day. The feeling becomes part of our identity. And the texts are crystal clear about this. Grasping is the fuel. It's that mental act of clinging, of holding on for dear life to our wants and our aversions that keeps the whole cycle of stress spinning, making sure that this moment's reaction plants the seed for the next moment of dissatisfaction. And from that one act of grasping, the rest of the dominoes just topple over. The full chain unfolds, leading to becoming, birth, and eventually the whole package deal: aging, death, sorrow, and distress. It's wild, right? A simple, neutral sensation cascaded through a series of completely automatic reactions into a deep state of dissatisfaction. Okay, I know that might sound a little bleak, but remember the other side of that principle. When this ceases, that ceases.
This chain isn't a prison sentence. It's just a process, and it's a process we can absolutely interrupt. This is where we talk about liberation.
So this becomes the crucial, most empowering question, doesn't it? We don't have to fight the whole thing at once. We don't have to defeat the entire chain. We just need to find the weakest link. We just need to find the one spot where we can skillfully step in. The entire practice of liberation really boils down to this single point. It's not about trying to stop seeing things or trying to stop feelings from arising. I mean, that's impossible. It's about mindfully choosing not to tip over that next domino so the whole line doesn't come crashing down. So where do we break it? Right here. The key intervention point is at grasping. If we can just stop that automatic reaction of clinging to our cravings, if we can learn to let a feeling just be a feeling without having to build a whole identity and a story around it, the chain is severed. The fuel for future suffering is cut off right at the source. Okay, so this all brings us to the most important question of all. This is a fantastic theory, but how in the world do we actually do it? How does knowing all this stuff actually help us get free? This is where we move from the diagnosis to the prescription. The best way to think of it is this. Dependent origination is the doctor's diagnosis. It shows you exactly what's happening and why you're feeling sick. The Noble Eightfold Path, then, is the prescription. It's a complete toolkit designed specifically to weaken and eventually break every single link in this chain. And here you can see the practice in real time. A pleasant feeling arises. The automatic, deeply ingrained habit is to immediately approve of it, welcome it, and cling to it. The practice is to mindfully notice that feeling, and then make a choice not to cling, to simply let it be what it is. When you do that, you are starving the root of greed right in that moment. And this chart just maps the tools to the job perfectly. Look at this. Right view is understanding this very system we're talking about. It's knowing the game you're playing. Right mindfulness is the tool you use to actually watch the dominoes, contact, feeling, craving as they pop up in your mind. And right effort? That's the active work of choosing not to push that next domino over, to not give in to the grab. So the big takeaway here is this. The theory isn't just some intellectual exercise. Knowing the map of dependent origination gives your practice a laser-like purpose and precision. You know exactly what you're looking for, and you know exactly where to apply your effort. You're not just sitting there meditating blindly. You are systematically deconstructing the very process that creates stress in your life. And that brings it all right back to this very moment. This isn't ancient history or philosophy. It's happening in your mind right now. As you go about the rest of your day, just watch. See if you can catch this process unfolding. Notice a contact, notice the feeling that follows, and see if you can spot that tiny little flicker of craving that comes right after. And maybe, just maybe, you can choose to simply observe it without grasping. So the question is, which link in your own chain will you pay attention to today?